State of the Union, what the president wants you to know about the coming year. Union fees, how a battle at the Supreme Court could affect organized labor across the country. Political endorsement, why Hillary Clinton could receive millions in support from Planned Parenthood. And global message, what the U.S. ambassador told us about the Pope's speech to diplomats from around the world. Those stories and more coming up on EWTN News Nightly for Monday, January 11th, 2016. Good evening. Thanks for joining us from Washington. I'm Brian Patrick. This is your News Now. Could the Supreme Court deal a major blow to organized labor? Well, a group of California public school teachers says mandatory union fees violate their First Amendment rights. Wyatt Goolsby reports from the High Court tonight.
Brian, several of the conservative judges are leaning towards overruling a 40-year-old precedent. The rule allows public unions to collect what's called fair share fees from non-members. It's sparking debate between teachers for and against the unions.
We believe in our ability to join together through our unions.
At first glance, today's rallies outside the Supreme Court may look like it's just a case about money. But those against the union, like Derek McCoy, say it's about more than that.
There's a religious liberty issue here, and then there's also a real education issue here. And the religious liberty issue is that, this is an infringement upon teachers, and they've been fighting this for years.
McCoy spoke at today's rally in support of Rebecca Friedrichs, lead plaintiff. The veteran Orange County teacher says the mandatory fees violate the rights of teachers who disagree with the union.
If you don't walk lockstep with the union's positions, with collective bargaining and their political positions, you are ignored and silenced. And that's what happened to me as a board member.
After today's oral arguments, Frederick spoke about the problems she has with the teachers union in her state. She believes they protect incompetent and abusive employees. But not everyone agrees stripping fees away is the right response. Jennifer Beto-Alleman, a high school English teacher from Maryland, supports the unions. She says her union has been a big help.
I think the idea of, again, being able to work together and have our voices heard so that we can advocate for the needs of our students, be that material, class sizes, or even things like more lesson planning time or collaboration time for teachers, that's pretty essential.
Those on the union side reminded me that those fees go towards a separate agency than the ones supporting political campaigns. Today, the justices heard oral arguments. We expect them to make a decision by late June. Brian?
Wyatt Goolsby at the Supreme Court. Thanks, Wyatt. Next to the White House, President Obama makes his last State of the Union address tomorrow. Our chief White House correspondent and political director, Lauren Ashburn, previews that speech.
Brian, this is the president's last State of the Union address, and the White House says it promises to be different, not full of the typical laundry list of accomplishments. The White House released this promotional video as the president puts the final touches on his State of the Union speech. With millions of eyes focused on this hour, tomorrow night's speech from the well of Congress on the grandest stage in American politics will not be a typical address.
The president's actually going to try to do something tomorrow that he regularly challenges Washington politicians to do, which is to look beyond the next election and actually consider the fate of the next generation of Americans.
He says the president doesn't plan on outlining a laundry list of policy initiatives, although he wants to work on bipartisan issues like criminal justice reform and passing the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership. And he will touch on what he calls his successes, including increased enrollees to his signature Obamacare health plan, the state of the economy with increased jobs and strong auto sales, foreign policy and national security highlights like the nuclear deal with Iran, and social issues like the redefinition of marriage. Republicans, including frontrunner Donald Trump, who calls the State of the Union a mess, say there's not much to be cheerful about. Also seated in the First Lady's box will be a Syrian refugee, Mexican immigrants, and an empty chair, symbolizing gunshot victims. Brian?
Thanks, Lauren Ashburn at the White House. And Planned Parenthood steps into the presidential campaign. For the first time, the abortion provider's political arm endorses a candidate in the primaries. As Jason Calvi tells us, their choice is no surprise.
Planned Parenthood's president endorsed Hillary Clinton at a rally in New Hampshire yesterday.
We don't need just a friend, a solid vote, a supporting statement. We need a fighter.
And Clinton says she's ready to fight.
And I promise you this, as your president, I will always have your back. We will work and fight together.
Clinton says part of that fight will be making sure people can get abortions. Another battle is funding for Planned Parenthood. Republican presidential candidates are against it.
Planned Parenthood should be funded, supported, and appreciated.
And Planned Parenthood will support Clinton with a cash surge. The group plans to spend at least $20 million on the election this year. It starts with their first ever primary endorsement.
Planned Parenthood is saying that it's unprecedented, but what's also unprecedented is the threat level to Planned Parenthood's prized $500 million of taxpayer funding.
Pro-lifer Ashley McGuire says Planned Parenthood isn't really fighting for women's health.
There's a major case before the Supreme Court this year asking the question whether there can be health standards, basic health standards, like whether or not an ambulance gurney should be able to fit down the hallway of an abortion clinic. And Planned Parenthood has been fighting tooth and nail those health regulations.
Congress sent a bill to the president that would have defunded Planned Parenthood, but he quickly vetoed it last week. So both sides of this issue are looking at this election to either fund or defund Planned Parenthood in the years to come. And the House has scheduled a vote to override the president's veto for January 26th. Brian?
Thank you, Jason Calvi. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Pope Francis calls on the global community to help refugees and migrants. He spoke today to diplomats who serve as ambassadors to the Vatican. The Pope says places such as Europe have a moral responsibility to welcome refugees. The Pope compares the current wave of migration to biblical times. He says it's like the Exodus from Egypt and the Babylonian exile.
I thought the speech was absolutely fantastic. You can imagine that us diplomats here at the Holy See, there is only one topic right now that everybody here in Europe especially is talking about, and that's the migration question.
I believe all European ambassadors listened very carefully to what he said about the migration crisis and about the Europe's values and humanistic values and how we should try to strike the right balance to cope with the situation.
The Pope also talked about the importance of families, speaking in support of marriage and pro-life issues. He praised international agreements like the Iran nuclear deal and the climate talks in Paris. The Pope also addressed new challenges like the North Korean nuclear test and the growing conflict in the Persian Gulf. EWTN News Nightly's Rome producer Mary Shevlin visits with Ken Hackett, the U.S. ambassador to the Holy See, discussing the Pope's speech.
What struck you about his message today?
I think today he focused on mercy again, mercy as the underlying motivation for all his trips. And then I would say migration. The migration issue is preoccupying, I think, to him and here in Europe, certainly, but also he brought it up in the context of the United States as well. And then he did kind of a world tour of some of the real sad situations, and he called them to our attention and in a compelling way. But again, with mercy underlying how we should be acting.
You brought up the visit to the United States that Pope Francis made last year to the United States and Cuba. How do you see relations after this visit between the U.S. and the Holy See? It seemed like a huge success.
From one perspective, it made American Catholics feel very good, but also made Americans feel very good. We didn't know Pope Francis that well, and he didn't know us that well. And the speeches he gave, the engagement he had, it showed Americans that this is a very special Pope.
How do you see this Pope making a difference worldwide?
Well, in a very short time, as your viewers know, he has gained prominence in the world as a world leader, and not just the leader of the Catholic Church. And as such, when he speaks, people listen. They may not always agree, but they listen.
Well, how would you be able to describe this papacy from being here in Rome, being able to work with him so closely?
It's a surprising moment, as everybody knows. And that's exciting when you're the ambassador, because you're on your toes all the time. This is not a sleepy administration, a sleepy papacy at all.
Ambassador Hackett, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
EWTN News Nightly's Mary Shevlin with Ambassador Ken Hackett. Well, ISIS claims responsibility for today's terror attack at a mall in Baghdad. Gunmen set off a car bomb before they stormed the mall. The suicide attack killed at least 18 people and injured about 50 more. The Syrian civil war just claimed the lives of at least a dozen second and third grade students. A bomb fell on their school in the outskirts of Aleppo. The human rights activist says their teacher was also killed and more people are missing in the rubble. North Korea presents a growing threat. The United Nations already condemned last week's nuclear test. Now North Korea has reportedly imprisoned a U.S. citizen accused of spying. CNN talked to a man who identified himself as Kim Dong-jul. He says the prisoner is a naturalized U.S. citizen who gathered military secrets from North Korea to give to China or South Korea. The U.S. State Department is not confirming that report. CNN was also granted an interview with a Canadian pastor serving a life sentence in North Korea. Hyun Soo Lim is accused of trying to overthrow the North Korean government. He was sentenced last month to hard labor. That's a big change for a man who previously served parishioners at his church in Toronto.
I wasn't originally a laborer, so the labor was hard at first. But now I've gotten used to it.
North Korean prosecutors say Lim entered the country more than 100 times under the false pretense of humanitarian aid. They claim he was using religion to try to overthrow Korea's atheist regime. Actor Sean Penn facing criticism for his interview with a convicted Mexican drug lord. Joaquin Guzman, known as El Chapo, was rearrested last week after escaping from a Mexican prison this past summer. Penn apparently interviewed Guzman while he was still on the run. Penn said he thought investigators might be tracking him, and he was right. A Mexican newspaper even published pictures of Penn arriving at an airport before October's interview. Penn's interview with the drug lord was just published in Rolling Stone magazine. And rock star David Bowie is being remembered around the world. He died Sunday at age 69. Bowie released his first album in 1972. His hits include Fame, Heroes, and Let's Dance. He battled cancer for a year and a half, and a spokesman says he was surrounded by family when he passed. The Vatican newspaper L'Osservatore Romano eulogizes Bowie as a singular musician. It calls the ambiguous image Bowie cultivated early on in his career an effort to attract media attention. The Vatican's cultural minister, Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi, earlier tweeted, "Ground control to Major Tom, commencing countdown, engines on, check ignition, and may God's love be with you." The Cardinal quoting from Bowie's hit Space Oddity. Coming up, attacks on churches, how vandals and arsonists are targeting Christians, and political debate. What you should know about the race for the White House.
Kind of alternative universe.
Persons are no longer seen as a paramount value to be cared for and respected, especially when poor or disabled or not yet useful, like the unborn, are no longer needed, like the elderly. Pope Francis from his speech today to the Holy See's diplomatic corps. Thanks for joining us this Monday evening for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. Another shock for people of San Bernardino. The Catholic Church closest to that recent California terror attack has just been vandalized. Catherine Szeltner has more on this developing story.
Brian, graffiti at Our Lady of Hope Catholic Church is never a surprise. For locals, there's frequent gang activity. But this act of vandalism is being investigated as a hate crime. Deputies discovered swastikas, upside-down crosses, and other satanic drawings on the California church early Friday. Volunteers quickly covered it with brown paper before morning mass and a scheduled funeral. The Diocese of San Bernardino believes the criminal's intent was to cause pain.
This person or persons knew this was a place of faith, of worship, and wanted to hurt the people and to put something up there that probably they thought would hurt them the most. Satanic imagery in a swastika, I don't know that you could get any worse than that.
The parish priest prayed for the criminals at Friday's morning mass. Volunteers have already painted over the graffiti symbols. Investigators have few leads in the case, but police are looking for an Hispanic male adult who was seen spray painting outside the church. Half of the victims from the recent San Bernardino attack were Catholic. The diocese says it's been a traumatic time for local parishioners, but they hope to keep moving forward. Brian.
Thank you, Catherine Szeltner. And Pope Francis does not pretend to solve the problems of Mexico with his visit there next month. So says the church's envoy to Mexico. Archbishop Christophe Pierre says he's read a lot in the media about Francis coming to solve the problem of violence, the problem of disappearances. The Pope begins his visit in Mexico City a month from tomorrow. He's expected to draw more than 2 million pilgrims to the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Francis also plans to visit Ciudad Juarez on the border across from El Paso, Texas. 50 bishops from different churches around the world gather in Amman, Jordan today. The bishops are from Europe, North America, and South Africa. They visited Bethlehem, the Gaza Strip, and Jordan during their annual Holy Land pilgrimage. In Amman, they met with Christians from Iraq who have fled their home country. A new poll shows Bernie Sanders catching up to Hillary Clinton in the race for the Democratic nomination. The Vermont senator is actually ahead of Clinton in New Hampshire and barely trails her in Iowa. The NBC News Wall Street Journal Marist poll shows Clinton with 48% to Sanders' 45% support among likely Iowa caucus goers. Ben Schreckinger is a reporter for Politico. Arielle Cohen, a campaign reporter for the Washington Examiner. Arielle, what do you make of those new numbers on the Democratic side?
Well, this is showing us that that once assumed lead that Hillary Clinton had nationally may no longer be the case. We see Bernie Sanders within the margin of error in Iowa and leading her in New Hampshire, which is showing that Hillary Clinton may not have this all locked up right now, and she's got to really be careful these next few weeks going into the Iowa caucus.
Ben, if she loses those two key first races, could she still be nominated?
She could still be nominated. She's a very strong front runner. It's unprecedented, though, to have someone in the modern primary system lose both of those states and go on to be the nominee. It would really panic Democratic Party insiders. It's possible you'd see someone like a Joe Biden or an Al Gore seriously contemplating storming into the race at that point. If she loses both of those, it would be sort of bedlam in the party.
Do you think she will, or is that just out of the question at this point?
I don't think it's out of the question. I also don't think it's likely. I think she's likely to hang on in Iowa, but that's by no means guaranteed.
So what about the FBI investigation of Clinton? Does that still play into this?
Oh, very much so. I mean, just say the FBI announced that they're looking into a possible violation of public corruption laws from Hillary Clinton, which is new news. They think that her work with the Clinton Foundation and the State Department may have overlapped in a unlawful way, and if so, she could be charged with public corruption, which would really hurt her campaign, in addition to all these emails that we're sorting through. As you saw with the last batch, the State Department was very late to send them out, and that really irritated a lot of journalists. So people are on the watch for what's going to come out of these emails, and that's in addition to the FBI investigating this possible public corruption.
Let's look at the Republican race now. What if Donald Trump goes into Iowa and New Hampshire and can't pull out a win? Where does he stand then?
He's in big trouble if he loses both of those states. Right now it's looking like he's likely to lose Iowa to Ted Cruz. That could always change. He's likely to hang on in New Hampshire and pull out one of those two. If he loses both of those states, though, Ted Cruz is going to have a lot of momentum going into South Carolina. And if he wins in South Carolina, the next big block of states to vote is heavily Southern, and Cruz could end up storming away with the nomination in that scenario.
What do you think, Arielle?
I think that that's very true. Donald Trump doesn't necessarily need to be winning Iowa to clinch the nomination. I mean, he's very popular in a lot of the rural states, but if he were to lose to Ted Cruz in this case, he could be losing a lot of momentum going into the next few primaries. He already has New Hampshire kind of locked up. I mean, the race there is for second place. You look at people like John Kasich, Chris Christie, Marco Rubio. They're all trying to get in there, hoping that when Trump falls, maybe they can sneak in. But in Iowa and New Hampshire, Donald Trump is leading right now.
All right, Arielle Cohen with the Washington Examiner, Ben Schreckinger with Politico. We appreciate both of you. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Up next, State of the Family, the pressures facing traditional marriage and American parents. And holy water. Meet one family whose baby was just baptized by Pope Francis. As he passed by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting their nets into the sea. Jesus came to them. "Come after me, and I will make you fishers of men." Then they left their nets and followed him. From today's gospel, according to St. Mark. Actually, Jesus said that to them, but he did come to them too. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. It is the Pope's first book since his election. The Name of God is Mercy. That's a 100-page conversation with an Italian journalist. Released in 86 countries tomorrow, that book draws on the Pope's views about mercy. He reiterates that his "who am I to judge" comment is in line with church teaching on homosexuality. The Family Research Council holds its second State of the Family address tonight. It is timed, of course, to precede tomorrow's State of the Union address. Arina Grosu is director of the Center for Human Dignity at the Family Research Council. What key issues are facing the family?
Well, first of all, let's go back to St. John Paul II, who said the future of humanity passes through the family. What is being threatened? The threat of abortion, the threat of now same-sex marriage, and also the threat of persecuted Christians.
It was not unexpected that the president vetoed this latest bill that would have defunded Planned Parenthood. What's ahead for the life issues after that veto?
We must rally around a pro-life candidate, because this next president, a pro-life president, will decide on the next Supreme Court justices. And this president will be able to vote to defund Planned Parenthood of over $500 million in funding, will be able to repeal Obamacare, and also pass the 20-week ban. And we're looking forward to this.
I heard that Kim Davis, the Kentucky clerk who was jailed for not issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples, would be there. What will we hear tonight about marriage and religious liberty along those lines?
We need to protect marriage and religious liberty. This is one of the times in history when it's at greatest threat. And America was founded upon religious liberty. And we need to look to how Kim Davis was able to win in her case and have a religious accommodation. There are other people like the Kleins who had to pay over $135,000 in fines. And so this is a threat to the family. It's a threat to individuals, to businesses, to the Little Sisters of the Poor. And we need to make sure that we protect religious liberty.
And of course, it's not just Americans whose religious liberty is being oppressed. In some parts of the world, Christians are being persecuted for their faith. What might be addressed there?
Unfortunately, not enough is being done by the Obama administration for the persecuted Christians. We need to continue educating our domestic churches about what's going on with the international church, and then in the new administration be able to address those things and to make sure that we do protect our brothers and sisters across the country and across the world.
I want to watch this. How can we watch the State of the Family address tonight?
It's at www.frc.org/SOTF for State of the Family, and it's at 7 p.m. Eastern Time.
All right, Arina Grosu, thanks for joining us
Thank you.
tonight. We appreciate you. And Pope Francis baptizes 26 infants in the Sistine Chapel Sunday. He welcomed them into the church.
Ginevra Francesca Maria.
The Pope pronounced each baby's name, pouring holy water from a golden shell-shaped dish onto their foreheads. It's an annual tradition marking the feast of the baptism of Jesus. Some of the babies slept, some smiled, and some screamed. And a few were named Francesco or Francesca. The 13 baby boys and 13 baby girls are all the children of Vatican employees.
Vi auguro che siate capaci di far crescere questi bambini nella fede.
In his off-the-cuff homily, Pope Francis urged the parents to teach their children the faith. He called it the greatest legacy they can give them. He also told the mothers to go ahead and nurse their hungry babies.
È stato molto emozionante.
Anna's baby daughter Marlene was one of the lucky infants. She says the Holy Father was kind and simple.
È stata un'esperienza veramente molto importante, grande, una responsabilità.
Her husband Francesco says it's a great responsibility, but something that parents can carry out in the small details of family life. The ceremony is held every year on the first Sunday following Epiphany. What a beautiful celebration, and you gotta love little babies. Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. We encourage you to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter, and we leave you with video of Christians in the Holy Land commemorating the baptism of Jesus. Good night. God bless you.